Hello. Today I'm speaking with Stefan Guertzgen, Global Director, Industry Marketing, Chemicals at SAP. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
Help us understand what some of the macroeconomic issues are that are affecting the chemical supply chain today.
Okay. I think the first trend, what we see is still a lot of volatility around raw material and energy prices. That not only means sourcing the right product at the right time from the right supplier, from a strategic perspective, that also means establishing a sustainable supplier basis as well as hedging against risk of financial risk and availability risk. The second trend, what we see is ongoing globalization and a shift of demand to the emerging countries. So the question what that means is where to put my assets or how to locate my production. Shall I move my entire production down to the emerging countries like China, like India, like Russia, or like the Middle East? Or am I better off just moving my raw material intermediates down there and do the final processing steps, formulation, for example, along with technical services down in those regions? So at the end of the day, it's a question of balancing my customer service levels against the cost of supply. The third trend, what we see, is around mergers and acquisitions and ongoing portfolio consolidations. Many companies who are back on the growth trajectory right now tap into the emerging markets via joint ventures or via mergers and acquisitions. So others, for example, which still have a diversified portfolio, they consolidate their portfolio just to enhance their competitiveness in the market. In both cases, that could mean disruption and eventually the need for total re-engineering the supply chain. So the fourth trend, what we see, is around innovation. And innovation not only means rapidly bringing new products to the market, as we see a lot of, the customers getting more and more demanding, competitors arise from the emerging markets, product life cycles are shortened, so the need for product innovation is there, but also the need to rapidly scale them up, to commercialize them, and integrating them into important business processes like sales and operations planning, for example. So that will, at the end of the day, determine the time to market and time to volume. So the fifth trend, what we observe, is overall it's compliance from a regulatory compliance perspective as well as from a global trade compliance perspective. So chemicals are by nature hazardous materials in most cases. So they are subject to environmental health and safety regulations. That's one thing, and those regulations are typically complex, and you see them growing on a global, on a regional, as well on a local basis. The other aspect is globalization brings about that there are a lot of cross-border shipments required, and that also exposes the chemical industry to global trade aspects and global trade safety aspects as well as regulations. So that's the second element in that compliance framework, what needs to be taken into account. And then last but not least is all about operational excellence. The chemical industry is a very asset-intensive industry, and primarily the overarching KPI is return on capital employed. That means that not only innovation is important and asset utilization, it's also important to control the costs along your entire value chain.
So given those trends, what would you say are the success attributes for a chemical supply chain?
So first, I would say it's adaptability. So the new dynamics in the market, along with the globalization, not only expose the chemical industry challenges, but they also provide opportunities. And tapping into these new opportunities means also that companies may have to completely re-engineer their business models and also transform their value chain. So, and I'll just give you a few examples of what that means. For example, look at the paint and coatings companies. Some of them are moving down the chain and start to run their own retail stores, which means they move from a B2B to B2C business model. So in silicon producers, for example, you see them entering the high-tech value chain. They are starting producing integrated components of for example, solar cells. That's another example. Third example is you see the the food and nutrition ingredients companies just acquiring, for example, biotechnology platform, and that provides them with completely new opportunities in the consumer product market. These are three examples which show the need for adaptiveness in terms of the overall supply chain strategy.
Oh, excuse me. I was just going to say, are there other success criteria in addition to adaptability?
Yes, there are other success criteria, and those are resilience. I think we all remember the devastating effects the hurricanes Katrina and Rita had in the Gulf area. So what it means for chemical companies, resilience means that they have to be able to rapidly understand the impact of those unexpected events, run what-if simulations, and implement contingency plans in response to those events.
So in addition to adaptiveness and resilience, are there others?
Yes, there is supply chain integrity. I mean, not only pharmaceutical companies or consumer product companies, also chemical companies are exposed to counterfeiting. And one example is the agrochemicals industry. And just preventing counterfeiting means in the chemical industry, it means you have to be able not only to track and trace the location of your product at any time, but also authenticate the product in terms of its origin. And then in case you identify a counterfeit material, then you have to trigger corresponding legal action or even recalls, depending on the overall impact of the case, so to say. So that's about integrity. And the first element is responsiveness. So responsiveness is, if we first look at the demand side, forecast accuracy is one element which helps to be responsive. You have to understand your customer and the market demand, and you have a lot of, for example, advanced forecasting technologies, algorithms, data mining technologies. That's one side of the medal. The other side of the medal is the supply side. So on the supply side, you also have to make sure that you have a very flexible manufacturing network available, which includes also tow manufacturers, which you can bring into the picture on a flexible as needed basis. And on top of that, on the supply chain side, on the supply side, you also need a kind of multi-echelon inventory strategies just to make sure that you have the right level of inventory or the optimal level of inventory along your supply chain, in your warehouses, in your distribution centers, in your plants. But not only location is important in that echelon, it's also important that you have the right level available. It could be raw materials, intermediates, or finished products. So that all needs to be optimized to make sure that you can meet the demand as needed.
And what are the key enablers of these important criteria?
I think the first key enabler is overall process integration from an end-to-end perspective and visibility. So this means that you have processes like demand management, supply planning, sales and operations planning, and plan scheduling completely integrated with the entire logistics fulfillment process. And that comprises sourcing, order commitment, inbound, outbound logistics, but also transportation management and global trade compliance services. So that comes along with that as well. So that end-to-end process integration is essential. Besides that, we also need collaboration, because collaboration has to happen along the supply chain in these complex environments. So you have to collaborate also from demand planning on, or actually it starts with demand planning and it goes along the entire value chain and ends probably with collaboration with ocean freight carriers. So collaboration is another critical element. And the third critical enabler is embedded analytics along with supply chain performance management. So what you need is, in any sub-process or any step along your process sequence in the supply chain, you need to have embedded analytics, which actually roll up into a hierarchical set of key performance indicators. So, and this kind of framework allows you to drill down at any time, at any level, into your supply chain performance and assess the performance of your entire supply chain framework at a process level or even at the overall level.
So what are the technology innovations that are having the biggest impact on the chemical industry and supply chain?
I think primarily what we see is in memory technology, mobility, and social media. And I'll just give you an example for that. let's look at in-memory technology. The sales and operation process, which is actually a tactical process, is more and more brought down to an operational level. That, of course, means you crunch the sequence of the sales and operation, not the sequence, but the period of the sales and operation process. You have to rapidly evaluate scenarios in terms of their material as well as financial impact on a much shorter time frame. Big data come together, need to be rapidly analyzed, so that's a perfect scenario for in-memory technology. And the second is mobility along with social media. And also here I would like to give you an example. There is an animal nutrition service provider who basically runs tank farms on his site, and they are equipped with transponders who send out telemetry data, push them into a Twitter feed the customer can subscribe to, and that allows him to assess the tank levels on a kind of real-time basis and basically align that with his replenishment plan. So that's the foundation for scenarios like vendor-managed inventory. That also gives you an idea as transponders speak to a mobile piece, which basically captures the Twitter feed. That gives you also an example how the next level of innovation could look like, which is machine-to-machine interaction.
All right, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with Stefan Guertzgen of SAP about trends and innovations in the chemical supply chain. Thank you for watching.